Alright, what's going on guys? In this video, I want to show you how to upgrade the Dovin Architect of Law Planeswalker deck. As always, do keep in mind that these aren't intended to be tier 1 competitive decks. If you want that, consider checking out the latest tournament results. Those decks do tend to be a little bit on the pricey side, however. What we'll be doing is upgrading this deck card by card, sticking to this deck's themes, and doing it on a budget, as we will not exceed the deck's original price with our upgrades. So, the Dovin Architect of Law deck is Azorius, or blue-white, and it has one major theme and one minor theme. And that minor theme is kind of terrible and probably just needs to be cut out entirely. So first off, it has a sort of lockdown theme with things like Verity Circle, Chillbringer, and Elite Arrestor. All of these things can tap creatures in one way or another. So ideally, you just constantly keep your opponent's creatures tapped down while you wail away at them. However, it also has this really weird flying theme. It's got things like Spirit of the Spires and Windstorm Drake, and what makes this so strange is that our main goal is to lock down our opponent's board. But then why does it matter if our creatures have flying? If our opponent isn't going to have any blockers anyway, why are we paying extra for the flying ability? Also, these two creatures are kind of terrible even if we are trying to build a flyers deck. And the third problem is, a lot of the creatures in the deck don't even have flying. In fact, 11 out of 21 creatures don't have flying. So literally more than half the creatures in the deck don't even work with these cards. So even though this does seem to be a little bit of a sub-theme going on, it just doesn't make sense to dedicate, just a small portion of the deck to cards that don't really synergize with anything else. It's just kind of weird. So I say let's just drop these and focus on building a deck that constantly taps and bounces our opponent's creatures. Our goal is going to be to try to be totally obnoxious and not let our opponents have creatures untapped ever. They'll probably hate us for it, but it'll be fun, I think. Anyway, the exclusive cards that come with the deck, the cards you can only get by purchasing it, are Dovin himself, along with Dovin's Automaton and Dovin's Dismissal. The Automaton is terrible if we don't have Dovin, though it is a 5/5 with Vigilance if we do have him. And the Dismissal is actually not bad. Putting a creature on top of our opponent's library and tutoring up Dovin, it's a little clunky, but it's actually not terrible. Although speaking of terrible, the deck does have some pretty bad cards that we need to cut out. Things like Prowling Caracal, Concordia Pegasus, and Senate Courier are all pretty bad. These are not the type of cards you want in a constructed deck. So let's take cards like this out and replace them with things that actually win a game from time to time. How about we do that? Let's get started. First off, we're going to take out 2 Prowling Caracals and replace them with 2 Adonto Vanguards. So both of these creatures really want to be attacking, and they're both 3/1s when doing so. But the Vanguard comes with the added bonus of being able to become indestructible if we pay 4 life. Now, 4 life is a lot to pay, but it can be a massive boon when our opponent plays a board sweeper or a removal spell, and we could just pay 4 life to save a creature, leaving us with the only thing on the battlefield. And yeah, don't be afraid to pay 4 life if this gets targeted by a removal spell either. It's just really good card advantage to have your opponent constantly have to throw cards at it and just have them wiped away just by paying a few life. It's kind of nice. Next, we're going to take out 2 Senate Couriers and replace them with 2 Exclusion Mages. The Couriers just aren't that exciting. It's only 1 damage per turn, which is kind of meh, and we have to dump mana into it in order to keep it as a blocker. Even if it had Vigilance to start with, without the activation cost, I'd still be pretty unimpressed. So the Exclusion Mage, on the other hand, they're just kind of hilarious. 3 mana 2/2s aren't that exciting, but when they come into play we get to return a creature card that our opponent controls to their hand. This is great because not only does it potentially clear away a blocker for us, but it also forces our opponent to spend a turn recasting that creature. And that's also another turn that that creature can't attack so long as it doesn't have haste. So basically, this is just a great tempo card. and it will also probably infuriate our opponent, which is what this deck is really good at. We're also going to take out a 10th District Veteran for another Exclusion Mage. So they both cost 3, but the Mage has 1 less toughness. However, the Veteran's ability just doesn't really do it for me. It untaps a creature when it attacks, basically giving a creature vigilance, but I just like the balance effect from the Mage more. Trust me, as we get through this guide, you're going to see it, but our plan is just to annoy the crap out of whoever we're playing, so trust me on this one. Next, we're going to take out one of the Dovin's automatons for 1 final Exclusion Mage. The deck has 3 of these automatons, and we're going to keep the other 2, but the deck really needs some cheaper creatures, and I was willing to sacrifice one of these for a 4th Exclusion Mage. Yeah, I know, the thought of a 5/5 with Vigilance is exciting, but that's not guaranteed if we can't keep a Dovin in play, and the Exclusion Mage is going to give us a better chance of keeping our opponent's board clear, which is what our main game plan is, so let's go with that. Next, we're going to take out 2 Spirit of the Spires for 2 Sphinx of Foresight. As I mentioned earlier, I just don't really like this flying sub-theme, and I especially don't like the spirit because pumping up the toughness of my creatures isn't what I want to be doing when I'm locking down the opponent's board anyway. Even in a flying deck, I wouldn't play Spirit of the Spires. The Sphinxes, on the other hand, are kind of great. They're 4 mana 4/4s with flying, so that's a pretty hefty body to start with, but then it allows us to scry for 1 every single turn. That's going to be hugely important and allowing us to filter our draws so we can hit more removal and bounce spells for our opponent's board, or to ensure we don't get flooded with lands since we can bottom any that we see once we have more than we need. Scrying every turn is just fantastic. Being able to look at the top card and just deciding whether you want to draw that or not, it's great. And the fact that it's also a big evasive threat is also pretty nice. Oh, and if you've been reading the card, yes, if you just so happen to draw it in your opening hand, you get to scry 3 at the beginning of the game. Being able to ensure that you draw into exactly the things you want is kind of great. It'll even allow you to keep bad hands, so you don't have to mulligan down to less cards. You know, like if you have an opening hand with only 1 or 2 lands, but you have a Sphinx, that can be keepable just because you get to look at the top 3, and if you don't see any lands there, then you can just bottom those, and you know, it just gives you a better chance of hitting more lands. So it lets you keep bad hands. It's a 4 mana 4/4 flyer, and also being able to scry every turn, kind of great. So yeah, it's a good card. I like it. Next, we're going to take out the Azorius Night Arbiter for a 3rd Sphinx of Foresight. The Knight is okay. I mean, once it's in play, it's actually not bad. It's guaranteed to deal 2 damage per turn because it's unblockable, and we're also guaranteed to have a big booty blocker since it has Vigilance. But 5 mana is kind of a lot to invest in it, and I think in the long run the Sphinx will serve us better, especially since it has flying and is attacking for a much more impactful 4 damage per turn. So yeah, I like the Sphinx. It's faster, it's hitting for more damage, and again, that scry effect is fantastic. Next, we're going to take out 3 of the Concordian Pegasus for 3 Healer's Hawk. So both of these have 1 power and flying, but the Healer's Hawk comes into play a turn sooner and has lifelink. Sure, we do lose some toughness, but what makes Healer Hawk so great is our opponent is going to have to spend so much time casting and recasting their creatures that by the time they can finally attack, we're going to gain all the life back that we lost from the last time they attacked us. It's just going to make it very hard for the opponent to make any progress on our life total if we can constantly keep their stuff off the battlefield and constantly gain life when we attack. Basically, the way it plays out is, you know, your opponent gets through, they finally get an attack off, but then we bounce their creature, and by the time they recast it, wait a turn if it doesn't have haste, and attack us again, we might have already gained, you know, 2 or 3 more life from the Healer's Hawk. So yeah, it's kind of great. Makes it really difficult for the opponent to just, you know, make any progress on our life, like I said. Really like Healer's Hawk in this deck. Next, we're going to take out a Chillbringer and replace it with a Mesmerizing Benthid. So they both cost 5 mana, but the Chillbringer is a 3/3 flyer, and the Octopus is a 4/5 with hexproof, so long as we have those tokens. Now, the Chillbringer taps a creature when it enters the battlefield, and the creature doesn't untap the following turn. The Octopus, on the other hand, spits out a couple of 0/2 tokens that, when they block, the other creature doesn't untap for a turn. The reason this is better is because Chillbringer taps down one creature for one turn, but the octopus locks down two creatures for a turn, plus they chump block, so we kind of get the effect of Chillbringer 4 times over. You know, if we think of locking down that creature as like a shield, we get 1 shield with Chillbringer, and we get 4 shields with the Benthed, because we get 2 chump blocks followed by 2 lockdown turns. So yeah, the octopus is kind of great. It's also a big 4/5 beater, so yeah, not bad at all. Next, we're going to take out a Windstorm Drake and replace it with another mesmerizing Benthed. Once again, I just don't feel like trying to make this a dedicated flying build. It's just bad, and the Benthed gives us another card that's going to be really good at locking down the opponent. It's just going to give us a more cohesive game plan. Also, don't forget, it has hexproof when we have those tokens. It's easy to forget since the text is at the bottom, but yeah, so long as we have one of those illusion tokens or any illusion at all, it has hexproof. Next, we're going to take out the other Windstorm Drake for an Azor the Lawbringer. Now this is a big threat. It does cost an extra 1 mana over the Drake, but it's a massive 6/6 flyer, and if you get to attack with it, it can take over a game. When it attacks, you can pay X and 3, and if you do that, you gain X life and, very importantly, draw X cards, meaning that if you can cast him the following turn, you can at least draw 3 cards and gain 3 life. It's a lot of mana to spend for sure, but drawing that many cards and getting that little bit of life boost can absolutely turn the tide of battle. Not to mention the fact that it's a 6/6 flyer. And as an added bonus, the turn after we cast Azor, our opponent cannot play instants or sorceries, which is important to remember because they might try to hit it with a removal spell. Now, if they cast an instant speed removal spell, they can cast it on your next turn, but if they were planning to play a sorcery speed removal spell or a board sweeper, nope, not happening. Azor prevents that, so you will get at least 1 attack in, and you can gain some life and draw some more cards, which is always nice. Next, we're going to take out 2 Code of Constraints for 2 Warrant Wardens. So if you cast a Code of Constraint on your main phase, it taps a creature for 1 turn, and you draw a card. If you cast Warrant, on the other hand, it puts an attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. So this is kind of the same effect, but for 1 less mana. Even though you don't get to draw a card, your opponent loses a draw since they need to redraw that creature. Remember, they had a card on the top of their deck and they were going to draw that next turn, but that creature is there now and they have to draw that creature. So at the end of the day, you do kind of end up a card ahead. Plus your opponent has to dedicate the mana recasting that creature. So it's actually a little bit better. But there's even more because you can also cast it for 5 and create a 4/4 Sphinx with flying and vigilance. This is great because if we're flooded on removal and we need a creature, then we can get a 4/4 flying threat. And if we're flooded on creatures and need removal, we can bounce a blocker and swing with the team. So yeah, it's versatile, and versatility is always nice. It's definitely a whole lot better than Code of Constraint. Next, we're going to take out 2 Summary Judgments for 2 Seal Aways. This is just improving a removal spell, plain and simple. Summary Judgment can kill a creature with toughness 3 or less, unless we play it at sorcery speed, which allows it to kill anything with 5 toughness or less by dealing 5 damage. The Seal Away can just flat out exile anything that's attacking us or anything that's tapped, and it has flash, so be sure to cast it after your opponent declares attackers, but before you choose blockers so you don't take damage from whatever's attacking you. Either way, I'd rather exile anything instead of dealing with Summary Judgment's damage limitations. Next, we're going to take out 2 Arrestor Zeal for 2 Sealaways. The problem with Arrestor Zeal is I just don't think I want to spend a card for this effect. It pumps a creature and it gives it flying if we cast it on our main phase, but we aren't really an aggro deck. I mean, don't get me wrong, we are going to win by attacking, but we aren't trying to go so fast that we are willing to throw cards away in order to get damage through. I'd much rather play Seal Away because that's what we're doing. We're ensuring that our opponent doesn't have anything on board, so that's going to work a whole lot better for us. It just fits with our game plan better. And then we're going to take out the last Arrestor Zeal for a single copy of Opt. This is just a filter card that lets us scry and draw, allowing us to sculpt our hand and filter our draws so we can ensure we draw the cards we need at any given moment. Opt is always nice to play on turn 1 to ensure we draw on curve in the early game, but it can also allow us to dig for a card that we desperately need if we get it in the late game. This kind of card is just important for this type of deck, being able to filter our cards and ensure that we hit a bounce spell, hit something that's going to tap a creature, or hit a big threat, whatever we need, being able to say, I need this thing, let me try to find it. Opt is the kind of card we need for that. And then finally, this was another long one, but we're going to take out 2 planes and 2 more opts. These decks always have way too many lands, so we can cut a couple of them and put opts in, which are a fine replacement since they can help filter the cards we're drawing anyway, so we can be sure to draw lands if we need them, or non-lands, just depending on what we need. So yeah, it's fine. Deck has 26 lands, 26 is too many. Taking a couple of them out for opts, absolutely fine. And that's the deck. If you want to spend a little bit more money on this thing, some of the things we couldn't play due to our budget are things like Warkite Marauder, Deputy of Detention, and Lyra Dawnbringer. Warkite Marauder is pretty decent. It's a 2-mana 2-power flyer that turns off our opponent's creatures, effectively neutralizing them as blockers, and Deputy of Detention exiles stuff when it enters the battlefield. Even multiple things if our opponent has multiple permanents of the same name. Lyra Dawnbringer literally has no synergy at all, but a 5-mana 5/5 with flying, first strike, and lifelink can absolutely win games single-handedly. She's just a powerhouse, and a single copy in most white decks would probably improve that deck most of the time. It's just kind of insane. It's the type of card that if it stays in play for a turn or two, I mean, you're probably winning. Anyway, if you do buy some of these more expensive cards, the weakest card in the deck at the moment in my opinion is Dovin's Automaton. They're decent if you have Dovin, but I don't think they're as good as Lyra Dawnbringer or Deputy of Detention, for example. So yeah, both of those would be better in my opinion, but hey, that's up to you. You could also upgrade the mana base with Glacial Fortress and Hallowed Fountain. These are pretty great and will vastly improve your mana base, but unfortunately they come at a cost. They're pretty expensive, but if you do happen to open any or trade for any, yeah, add them straight to the deck. Pull out some basic lands for them. They're very handy. Anyway, that's it. That's all of our upgrades. I know, people don't like it when I basically replaced the entire deck, and we came pretty close to doing that this time, but we are still on budget, and in my opinion, the deck is significantly more powerful than what we started with. If you've been playing this thing straight out of the box, there's no doubt in my mind, this will increase your chances of winning for sure. So even though we basically replaced like 90% of the deck, I don't know, it's like a lot of it, but what we have now is much more cohesive and probably also just very obnoxious and annoying. So yeah, there you go guys. That's the Dovin deck. If you want to see more Planeswalker deck upgrade videos like this, I have an entire playlist dedicated to them, and you can find a link to that in the description below. Also consider subscribing, as I plan to upgrade every Planeswalker deck that is released in the future. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.